Welcome to Military Analytics. The war between Ukraine and Russia severely connected the fateful partnerships of the Eastern European bloc. The endangerment of Russia's borders with Eastern Europe and the later spread of the war to much wider areas especially worried NATO member states. Moscow's invasion plan strengthened Poland's relations with Kiev, one of Ukraine's most important allies and neighbors. Poland is now trying to warn the wider world of the danger posed by Putin's Russia. This is not just a regional clash. Russia's war against Ukraine is a potential source of global fire. Polish President Andrzej Duda is very sensitive on this issue and does not hesitate to constantly state that he is completely against Russia and that they will continue to stand by Ukraine. The war in Ukraine has become a sudden impetus for the militarization and rearmament of the countries of the world. Poland is taking drastic measures to prevent Russian aggression and threats in Europe. Poland has sworn to build the largest army in Europe. It is preparing an army and an armored unit for this. Polish Defense Minister Mariusz Błaszczak announced plans to increase the country's army from 150,000 to 300,000 due to Russian aggression. Błaszczak stated that within 2 years the Polish army would become the strongest in Europe. Błaszczak added that Poland will soon receive dozens of US-made Abrams tanks. The government ordered 116 old M1A1 Abrams as a temporary measure to replace tanks shipped to Ukraine. The minister stated that US M1 Abrams tanks will join the 18th Mechanized Division stationed in eastern Poland. So far, the first batch of M1A1 tanks has arrived in Poland. In addition, the Polish army will have added all to 50 M1A2 CP3 tanks to its inventory in a few years. This tank army of Poland is supported by hundreds of 4th-generation K2 Panther tanks and K9 howitzers and Polish Borsuk armored vehicles. Dozens of HIMARS and Patriot systems also support the Polish military. Poland received 32 Farads 35 fighter jets and at least 6 F-22 fighter jets from the USA. 96 RH-64 Apache helicopters purchased from the USA and 48 Fa-50 warplanes currently ordered from South Korea will provide strong air support to Poland. Militarization in eastern and northern Poland shows the strength of the alliance to Russia. The huge Polish army stationed at military bases near Kaliningrad and the Belarusian borders worries Putin deeply. While Poland sends a direct push back to Russia with military measures, it also warns Russia with heavy sanctions. Poland is also very brave in the sanctions decisions taken against Russia. In fact, we saw the latest example of Poland's harsh stance on this issue much more clearly in the 11th package of sanctions planned to be held against Russia. Recently, Poland and the Baltic states are pushing for sanctions against Russia's nuclear power industry. The Warsaw government has called for Russian nuclear energy issues to be included in the European Union's 11th sanctions package. With this attitude, Poland almost warned the Russian leader, Vladimir Putin, for the last time to give up this war because economic sanctions are one of the most important factors slowing down the Russians in this war. The EU's 11th sanctions package also seems to have a serious impact on Russia. The reason for this is that the sanctions package will contain heavy conditions. The relevant proposals in the text of the sanctions were presented in a document for EU countries. It touches upon measures against the Russian company Rosatom, including individual sanctions against the Russian administration, bans on new contracts, a ban on investment in Russia's nuclear sector, and a ban on imports of Russian enriched uranium. The 4 countries that have long advocated sanctions against Rosatom have proposed some exceptions and transition periods this time. For example, the termination of cooperation with Rosatom will be gradual and will not last more than 2 years. Hungary will be given a 9-year transitional period to complete the construction of the Pac's nuclear power plant using Russian technology. The authors of the document state that some EU countries have already refused to cooperate with Russia in the nuclear field, citing the Czech Republic and Finland as an example. However, the necessity of obtaining the approval from the entire EU in order to impose sanctions on this area raises serious doubts. On the other hand, it should be noted that Hungary, France, and Bulgaria, which are highly dependent on Russian technology, have already expressed their opposition to the proposal. Brussels, on the other hand, believes that the 11th package of sanctions is aimed not at expanding the list of areas of the Russian economy that are subject to sanctions, but at preventing the already imposed restrictions from being circumvented. It should be noted that EU countries have previously discussed the inclusion of Rosatom in the 10th package of sanctions imposed on the Russian Federation. Lithuania and Poland insisted on this, but Hungary and Bulgaria blocked the proposal for sanctions against Russia. Ukraine has proposed to use its presence at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant as a basis for imposing restrictions on the Russian state company. However, the restriction decision against Rosatom was not included in the 10th package of sanctions, as countries such as Hungary and Bulgaria refused. Arvydas Anušauskas, head of the Lithuanian Ministry of Defense, stated in an interview with Guildhall that the argument for sanctioning Rosatom was that this concern would produce nuclear weapons. Earlier, a member of the European Parliament from France, Raphael Glucksmann, chairman of the Special Committee on Foreign Intervention, reported that the entire military-industrial complex of the Russian Federation, of which Rosatom is also a part, should be under sanctions restrictions. The country that acted most courageously in this regard was Poland. Currently, the Warsaw government, since the beginning of the war, opposes the Russian occupation of Ukraine and supports economic sanctions against Moscow. Poland is literally leading the European response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine, as Europe found itself facing the continent's biggest armed clash since World War II. These efforts by the Polish leadership were seriously unique. Also, Poland's leading role in the European response to Putin's invasion reflects the country's extensive experience of Russian imperialism in both its Tsarist and Soviet forms. Since Poland's accession to the European Union in 2004, politicians in Warsaw have warned Europe of the growing threat posed by a resurgent and revisionist Russia. In addition, Poles were particularly concerned by signs of deepening ties between Berlin and Moscow and vocally opposed the German partnership in Russia's Nord Stream 2 gas pipeline. Polish politicians have warned of this strategic energy infrastructure project that the second pipeline will allow Putin to bypass Ukraine's gas transit system and leave the whole of Europe vulnerable to Russian energy blackmail while subjecting the country to a full-scale invasion. Germany chose to ignore these warnings until the eve of Russia's February 2022 offensive. Moreover, Poland's prominent role in European security policy today is not entirely new. Since joining NATO in 1999, Poland has become a security element on the alliance's eastern flank. This was made possible thanks to Poland's strategic location and its extraordinary economic growth, which helped finance the rapid modernization and expansion of the country's armed forces. The Polish army, on the other hand, is currently shown as one of the most powerful armies in the world. Poland has in many ways set the standard for European humanitarian intervention in the Russian offensive against Ukraine since the invasion began. Poland has accepted more Ukrainian refugees than any other European country, while also providing a range of benefits such as access to health and education as well as employment opportunities. Over the past year, Polish authorities registered more than 1.5 million Ukrainian refugees. Poland is also one of the leading contributors of military aid to Ukraine at per capita rates. Poland sent more military aid to Ukraine than almost any other country except the Baltic states. This aid included hundreds of tanks and other important weapons. Poland plays a vital role in the logistical effort to deliver international military aid to Ukraine, enabling a global coalition of countries to supply the Ukrainian army with the weapons, equipment, and ammunition it needs. Most recently, the Warsaw government has decided to send 4 MiG fighter jets to the Ukrainian army, making it the first NATO country to send aircraft to Ukraine after Russia invaded Ukraine last year. Meanwhile, the Polish leadership continues to help fill the geopolitical vacuum created by the waning influence of Europe's traditionally dominant foreign policy powers. The Polish leadership of Europe's response to Putin's invasion also forges unprecedented ties between the Polish and Ukrainian people. These two nations have suffered from quarrels and historical conflicts in the past. However, they now find themselves united by the existential threat from today's Russia. Ukrainian opinion polls regularly show Poland as the country's closest partner, while the Kremlin cynically conceals its genocidal invasion of Ukraine with a language of Slavic brotherhood. It is Ukraine's Slavic neighbors in Poland who truly show fraternal support. This will shape the future geopolitical landscape of the region. When Russia is defeated, Ukraine will likely deepen its partnership with Poland to form a strong bloc in European politics. Together, the two nations will have an authoritative voice in the wider democratic world. Bakhmut is increasing its political importance for the Russian forces day by day. However, the Ukrainian forces do not allow the Russians to capture Bakhmut and gain psychological superiority. In addition, frictions between the different military configurations of the Russian forces provide the Ukrainian forces with the space to succeed. While the Ukrainian forces are making great breakthroughs, the Russian army continues to suffer losses. Hungry for success. Bakhmut will be instrumental in unraveling a big knot in the course of the war. Let's examine together how to untie this knot. Ukrainian forces made a serious move towards Bakhmut and the Luhansk region. A large military formation consisting of up to 120 pieces of military equipment of the Ukrainian armed forces, including tanks, armored personnel carriers, army trucks, tractors, and other weapons were spotted near Izium. Territorial efforts of the Russian forces in Bakhmut caused the deployment of military equipment of the Ukrainian forces in this region, not only in the Izium region. The Ukrainian forces deployed a large military formation in the Kupiansk region. Recently, there has been a significant reduction in the long-range artillery attacks of the Russian forces. This is due to the lack of ammunition. Russian forces are trying to achieve their goals by conducting limited ground operations in the direction of Bakhmut. A video on social media showed the military deployment of Ukrainian forces in Izium. There are some interesting details in this video. As can be seen from this video, Ukrainian forces are planning a massive counterattack, possibly sweeping the Russian forces. At the same time, the Ukrainian forces display a relaxed attitude. It was seen that the Ukrainian forces deployed their military equipment in the Izium region openly and collectively. If Russian forces attack with tactical weapons, all equipment in the area may become ineffective. However, this possibility is ignored by the Ukrainian forces due to the Russians' lack of ammunition. Izium, where Ukrainian forces are transporting additional weapons, is 50 miles away from the Bakhmut area, which is the main focus of serious fighting and Russian forces. Likewise, the Kupiansk region is 27 miles from the Svarto front line. The sending of a large amount of additional military equipment to the Kupiansk and Izium region by the Ukrainian forces indicates that a decisive counterattack will be made on the battlefield. A successful counterattack by the Ukrainian forces in the direction of Bakhmut and Svartov could be the liberation of the Luhansk region. In recent days, news about the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Bakhmut has been spreading rapidly. An aide to Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky hinted that such a situation would happen. Alexander Rodnyansky stated that if the cost of holding the city was judged to outweigh the benefits, Ukrainian forces would withdraw from the city. Vladimir Zelensky in his evening speech drew attention to the worsening situation on the battlefield. Zelensky noted that everything that could be used for the defense, reinforcement, and defense of the Ukrainian forces was gradually destroyed by the Russian forces. However, Yevgeny Prigozhin, the leader of Russia's paramilitary organization Wagner, denied the withdrawal of Ukrainian forces. An audio recording of Prigozhin soon went viral on social media. In this audio recording, Prigozhin shared very important information about the ongoing battle in Bakhmut. Prigozhin noted that the armed forces of Ukraine is collecting new military reserves in Bakhmut, and he emphasized that the Ukrainians are trying to defend the city at all costs. Prigozhin stated that the Ukrainian army fiercely resisted with tens of thousands of fighters, and the bloodshed of the clashes increased day by day. With these statements, Prigozhin proved that the claims of the Russian newspapers are not true. A statement made by a senior Ukrainian official recently, and Prigozhin's statements are in line with each other. Ukrainian Deputy Defense Minister Hanna Malaya confirmed that reinforcements are on their way to Bakhmut, pointing out that Kiev is determined to control the strategically important city of Bakhmut. Malaya told national television that Ukrainian soldiers are on the way. However, she did not reveal exactly how many soldiers would be sent. The purpose of the troops to be sent as reinforcements to the Bakhmut region has not been fully clarified. These units can provide support in a tactical withdrawal of Ukrainian forces, but can be invaluable to Ukrainian soldiers who have been resisting in the region for several months. Wagner boss Yevgeny Prigozhin, while trying to seize the Bakhmut region, also brought up that they had a different problem apart from the Ukrainians. The commander of Russia's Wagner private army stated that while trying to take control of Bakhmut, he was unable to get the ammunition he needed from Moscow. The city in eastern Ukraine has been the scene of intense fighting for months. Yevgeny Prigozhin accused the Russian Ministry of Defense, claiming that his army's lack of ammunition was inordinary bureaucracy or treason. The obvious rivalry between the Wagner PMC and the regular Russian army has intensified in recent weeks. Prigozhin accused the Russian Defense Ministry of not providing the ammunition it needed, and this was not the first time Prigozhin noted that the documents were signed and the ammunition is expected to be sent to Bakhmut the next day. But he said most of them were not shipped, suggesting that this may have been intentional. As another indication of the disagreement between Wagner and Russian Defense Ministry, Prigozhin noted that his representative was not taken to the headquarters of the Russian military command. Prigozhin stated that his men feared that there would be blamed as scapegoats if Russia lost the war in Ukraine. Prigozhin stated that if they took a step back, the reason for losing the war would go down in history as the Wagner soldiers. Prigozhin also said that Russia's front line would collapse without its troops, while the Russian forces are experiencing a crisis among themselves. The Ukrainian forces are looking for soldiers to turn this crisis into an opportunity. The Ukrainian president and military commanders agreed to strengthen Bakhmut's defenses. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky stressed that his country's military commanders support the ongoing operations to defend and strengthen positions in Bakhmut. President of Ukraine Zelensky met with the commander of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Valery Zaluzhny, and the commander of the Land Forces of Ukraine, Oleksandr. The leaders of Ukraine stated that they have decided to continue the defense operation and further strengthen our positions in Bakhmut. Then the Ukrainian assault brigades went on the offensive. Hundreds of Ukrainian soldiers participated in the counterattack. Ukrainians carried out various attacks and hit the Russian positions with artillery from the surrounding hills. Ukrainian commanders acknowledged that their forces in Bakhmut were still at risk of encirclement, but recent developments have shown that an army that has shocked the world with its stubbornness is not yet ready to give up. Bakhmut. Even before Ukraine stepped up its offensive against the Russians in Bakhmut, Ukrainian forces continued to work to repel Russian troops from the last major highway leading to the city. This highway was of great importance for the Ukrainian forces, both the supply line that helped Ukrainian soldiers stop the Russian offensive for months, and the Ukrainians would use this highway to get to safety if they decided to withdraw. Colonel Yevhen Mishkin, the commander of a combined tactical group fighting in Bakhmut, stated that they had enough forces to repel the Russians from this city. But the Ukrainians achieved great success in Bakhmut with maximum damage to the Russian forces, even if they could not hold the city. In this process, the soldiers in the Ukrainian forces were very tired, but none of them want to give up in the face of Russian forces. Bakhmut had little strategic value, but the battle for the city made it an important location for both the Russian and Ukrainian armies. Now, with a pre-war population of 70,000, Bakhmut is not a battleground, but a ring to see which army can defeat the other. While Ukraine used every hard-learned tactic since the one-year war, Russia sent tens of thousands of newly mobilized soldiers against the Ukrainians to seize the city with manpower. As can be seen from the number of casualties the Ukrainians inflicted, maximum damage to the Russians. Wagner units started using much bigger assault units and captured several new positions by overwhelming Ukrainians with the sheer number of troops. However, Ukrainians came back on tanks and within minutes obliterated more than 6 buildings that Wagner's used as major fortifications. As a result, Russians had to create several teams of loaders to collect their debt after the fierce raid. Last time I told you that Ukrainians started to demolish key Russian positions by conducting precision strikes. I also told you that such a use of air bombs and missiles already dealt a lot of damage to Russian logistics and forced them to take time to regroup. The freshest reports indicate that this was just the beginning. Combat footage released by the Russian side showed that Russians are actively using tall buildings to target Ukrainian positions at a distance. When it comes to 10-story buildings, Russians do not even need to get on the roof to get a clear view of the target. That is why the primary target of Ukrainians became high-rise buildings along the Vanovsky Street, from where Russians have been targeting the whole western side of the city. Combat footage released by the Ukrainian side shows how Ukrainians conducted a powerful strike on one of the tall buildings. Judging by the explosion, it looks like Ukrainians used the HIMARS rocket for this purpose. Another video shows a controlled explosion of the second high-rise building just across the street. This particular building was causing a lot of trouble for Ukrainians because it was used by Russian snipers as seen previously in intense urban fights. The front line can move back and forth quite substantially, even in one day. So it looks like Ukrainians conducted a counterattack in this region, temporarily recaptured the area and set explosives. The operation was conducted very timely as Russians in this region were regrouping, which made them more susceptible to frontline penetrations. The operation was successful and Ukrainians achieved a much better result than with the hammer strike in the central part of the region. There are a lot of changes. Many reports suggest that Ukrainians left the engineering department and medical college and assumed defense in the high-rise buildings behind them. Some analysts are saying that the goal is to move closer to the main fortifications, while others are saying that the move was forced by the recent Russian advancement from the south. It looks like the first explanation fits better because recent combat footage showed that Russians do not have tight control over the region. The main goal of Russians was to split Ukrainian forces in Bakhmut into two groups. However, even after establishing control over the industrial college, Ukrainians are freely moving between these two parts of the town due to the local geography. The territory behind the houses is in the lowlands, making direct fire impossible. In turn, recent combat footage shows how Ukrainians conducted an unexpected raid on Russian positions and unleashed rapid and devastating fire from two tanks on two sides. After the raid, the drone operators filmed how several Russian crews were moving through the area with huge wheelbarrows collecting corpses and pots of bodies. As the drone revealed a new movement in the region, Ukrainians doubled the damage by striking the areas of forces concentration right behind the industrial college. It is unclear why the Ukrainians conducted a counterattack yet, but one slightly older video showed that counterattacks after such raid allow Ukrainians to collect a lot of trophies from the dead. The video shows how Ukrainians are disinfecting dozens of guns taken from the defeated Wagner troops. Ukrainian soldiers also published a video of another trophy, namely a thermobaric artillery system allegedly used in the Bakhmut direction. Today, the head of the Wagner group, Prigozhin, said that Wagner forces advanced in some places by up to 250 meters, but added that it came at a huge cost. He said that they lost 99 soldiers in one day of offensive actions. However, the figure is likely much higher, especially taking into account recent artillery strikes and tank raids on defensive Russian positions. He once again underscored that they are taking more than 5 times as many losses as he expected. In a recent interview, he said that if the Russian Ministry of Defense continues to put spokes in his wheel, then the Wagner mercenaries will be faced with the decision to either stay and die or withdraw from Bakhmut. Prigozhin also continued his efforts to convince the Kremlin to go over to the defensive in the eastern Ukraine. He claimed that the Ukrainian counteroffensive could take place before the 15th of May and took an opportunity to criticize regular Russian forces for not rushing to prepare Wagner's flanks to repel attacks. It is unclear how much of it is true, but one thing is clear for sure. Over the last 2 months, progression has gradually set perfect information conditions for an unpleasant surprise. So if something terrible happens on this side of the front, he can retain his reputation and deflect the blame. In the meantime, Ukrainian commander, setting information conditions for a surprise as well. 2 days ago, the spokesman for the 10th Assault Brigade announced that Ukrainians are preparing for Wagner's a huge surprise. This was also repeated by the spokesman for the 93rd Mechanized Brigade and a fighter from the 3rd Assault Brigade, all of whom are fighting in and around Bakhmut.